Hello, guys. My name is George Diaz, and today I'm going to present and analyze Adventureland Crisis and develop my own crisis management plan. So, what exactly is a crisis management plan? A crisis management plan is utilized when a crisis occurs and threatens the reputation of an organization. This crisis management plan includes general prevention strategies as well as how to react during a crisis involving Adventureland parks. The purpose of this plan is to uphold outstanding standards of the park. Preparation is key to the success of any organization during a crisis. And as we all know, a crisis can occur at any point in time, which is why it's important to consider as many possible crisis scenarios in order to build an effective crisis management plan. So, what are some possible crises that can occur at Adventureland? Some examples of a likely crisis that can occur at Adventureland would be a natural disaster, such as hurricanes, earthquakes, floods, tornadoes, and wildfires. Natural disasters can potentially physically harm staff and visitors, damage rides and equipment, and can cause power outage. Sanitation crises would involve vomiting on rides, unsanitary restrooms. Restaurants could result in diseases and sickness outbreaks. Next, organizational misdeeds, such as failure to properly train employees or equipment not meeting regulation standards. Ride/operator malfunction crises are crises such as ride malfunctions that can cause delays or even the shutdown of certain areas of the park. And lastly, financial crises such as employee embezzlement or bankruptcy. There are also some unlikely crises that we must take into consideration. These crises can be terrorist attacks, death, or serious injury of constituents, kidnapping, and life-threatening ride malfunctions. This crisis that occurred at Adventureland is tragic. On Saturday, July 3rd, the Hermelio family celebrated their 11-year-old son, David's Hermelio's birthday by taking their family to Adventureland in Iowa. Around 7:30 p.m. that day, the six family members rode the raging river. While the raft immediately began having issues taking on water. As the raft reached the end of the ride, it capsized into the water, leaving the family trapped underwater, gasping for air. Eventually, both parents and one of their sons and niece were able to free themselves and swim to the surface, while both 11-year-old Michael and 15-year-old David were still trapped underwater for up to 10 minutes. Eventually, onlookers and employees were able to help rescue Michael and David under the raft. Life-saving measures were almost immediate from workers near the accident site staging for a fireworks show. The family was rushed to a local hospital where the two parents and one of their sons and niece were treated for minor injuries, while Michael and David were in critical condition. As soon as the crisis occurred, it is imperative to communicate with the news media, social media platforms, employees, and other constituents and lawyers. These communications must begin ASAP and occur within the golden hour following the crisis. The reason for this is all about controlling the crisis and releasing accurate information to the public. If the organization does not respond to within the first hour, it will lose the control of the crisis information and let the news media control it. It might also seem that the organization doesn't care about the crisis or they have no idea what's going on. Remember, it's all about keeping the trust of your constituents and protecting the organization's brand image. In this case, Adventureland posted on Facebook its first official statement about the crisis that same evening that it occurred. This allowed Adventureland to be the first to report on the incident and accurately release information that is available at the time. I believe Adventureland responded correctly by releasing a statement within the golden hour. They went straight to the facts that were available at the time, quickly shutting down the ride and acknowledging the safety inspections, thanking the local police and fire department, and delivering an empathetic statement in support of the family. Unfortunately, the following day on July 4th, 11-year-old Michael Carmelio passed away while his other brother, David, was still on life support at the hospital. Yet again, Adventureland jumped into action and released an empathetic statement on Facebook that same day, showing that they care for the family, as well as that they are transparent by working with local authorities and letting them do their investigation to get to the bottom of it. As the days go by, Adventureland attorney speaks out to local news outlets responding to questions and allegations. This is where I think Adventureland can improve on handling their communication strategies. When it comes to communicating with the outside world, it is important to have the right spokesperson to make the statements. Park owners must avoid making deliberative statements, either accepting the blame or blaming the victims. Adventureland should also not have its attorney speaking for it so soon after the accident, because that makes the company appear defensive. Instead, it would be better if they had a different spokesperson to speak for the park, preferably an individual who is a parent and someone who's going to deliver all the statements sympathetically and in person instead of social media. It is important to note that the appropriate time for an attorney to step forward should be only after a lawsuit is filed or legal action is threatened. And as far as we know right now, the family is dealing with much more urgent crisis at the moment than trying to sue. Their son is battling for his life. Adventureland should avoid only communicating with one outlet. Instead of only making statements on Facebook or having their attorney answering questions, they need to make an official statement in person. Only responding on social media and to news articles is not enough for this kind of crisis. Adventureland also has to speak to its employees as well about the situation and keep them informed. Remember that employees are the first representative of the organization that speaks to its constituents. They have to be informed with the latest information to be kept in the loop. Lastly, Adventureland needs to show that they care for the family. Remember that Adventureland's most important immediate audience are the victim's family, which they need to hear that the park owners care about them, and current and future park guests who need to hear that the accident was extraordinarily unusual and that the park remains safe. In this particular crisis, I would suggest using the apologia theory. The apologia theory is used when an organization is accused of a misdeed. It's meant to defend reputation and protect image, not so much of an apology. And there's three approaches to the apologia theory, which the first is redefinition. Redefinition is when an organization communicates to the public and redefines the discussion. They seek to remove any connection between the crisis and Adventureland. In a sense, they try to use a scapegoat, which is in a sense shifting the blame to an external group from Adventureland. Next is dissociation. This is when an organization informs the public that they appear to have committed the misdeed, but actually did not. And the third approach is conciliation, which is an apology and a request for forgiveness. With the information available right now, I think Adventureland's best apologia approach would be conciliation. When trying to improve and rebuild Adventureland's reputation, because of right now, even though the remainder of the park, minus the water ride, is open, guests may find themselves second guessing the level of safety on other rides in the park. And the last thing Adventureland needs is to lose its trust of its constituents. Adventureland should compensate by offering to pay for the medical bills of the family as well as other incentives. Adventureland should partially apologize, sympathetic. They should not accept blame unless they are prepared to accept full legal responsibility. Only express concern and regret. This is because at the moment of the moment the investigation has not been completed. So we don't know what caused the incident to occur. If Adventureland is found to be blamed after the report, then they need to do anything to rescue their reputation. At that point, I would advise them to do a full apology by acknowledging the crisis and accepting responsibility, and include a promise to not repeat the crisis and express concern and regret in person. Lastly, is to evaluate the effectiveness of the crisis management plan and learn from it. During this time, the crisis is still underway as an investigation is still pending, and David, the 15-year-old boy, is still in an induced coma. That being said, Adventureland has to stay alert and update its constituents throughout the whole process. To evaluate the effectiveness of Adventureland crisis management plan, the crisis response team will examine the execution of the crisis management plan and determine the amount of damage incurred as a result of the crisis. The first step in assessing the effectiveness of the plan is evaluating the data associated with the crisis. Everything from news articles to social media scanning to internal performance procedures, the team should analyze these elements to determine if any mistakes were made during the crisis response. Adventureland should issue surveys and conduct interviews to both internal and external constituents to collect feedback. Constituent feedback is essential in identifying the effectiveness of the crisis management. Social media and traditional media coverage are also important forms of constituent feedback and reveal the perceived efficiency of Adventureland crisis management performance. Next is to analyze the data. After collecting the necessary records, the team must analyze the data for performance evaluation. After that, you need to assess the damages. Evaluating damage to the reputation is essential in determining crisis management effectiveness because constituent perception is key in any organization. Adventureland should perform pre-crisis and post-crisis analysis of Adventureland reputation to determine the crisis impact. Financial damage can be assessed through the use of financial resources, including those used in legal suits, property damage/repairs, media coverage, and etc. Lastly, is to create a final crisis performance report. The essential takeaway from any crisis is what the organization learned from it. The best crises are those that never happen due to the effective crisis prevention. However, once a crisis does occur, the organization can use its evaluation of effective and ineffective crisis management and learn from its mistakes. The final executive evaluation of crisis management and learn from its mistakes. My bad. The final executive evaluation of a crisis management should address what Adventureland's goals were and if those goals were achieved, which tactics were effective and which were ineffective, and suggestions for what to do in the future if a similar crisis occurs. The report should essentially be a complementation of a SWOT analysis, which can be used to improve the crisis management plan. And that's my presentation. Thank you.